Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, October 26th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Katie J. Wells, co-author of Disrupting D.C, The Rise of Uber and the Fall of the City. And later in the show, Alex Sammon will be back with us to talk about Mike Johnson, the new extremist Republican House Speaker. Meanwhile, at least 18 killed and 60 injured in a mass shooting in Maine. A manhunt is underway for the suspect, who is reportedly a trained firearms instructor with documented mental health issues. Israeli tanks briefly enter northern Gaza as a teaser to the catastrophic ground invasion, which can only be halted by demands for a ceasefire. Biden continues to refuse to do so. He did, however, condemn settler attacks in the West Bank. It's the bare minimum, in my opinion. This comes as the death toll passes 7,000 in Gaza and the number of children dead nears 3,000. Al Jazeera Arabic Bureau Chief Wael Dadua's wife, son, daughter, and grandson killed in an Israeli airstrike. Election-denying anti-gay, anti-abortion Representative Mike Johnson of Louisiana, new Speaker of the House, after 3 weeks of GOP infighting. And the Speaker's first action to bring up the vote on support of Israel. Only 10 voted against and 6 abstained. The 10 are the Squad Plus. The UAW reaches a tentative agreement with Ford after 6 weeks of strikes, with wage raises and costs of living adjustments reinstated. With the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, the UN estimates a record 114 million people will be displaced globally. New York Republicans prepare a formal resolution to expel George Santos. That seems unfair. What did he do?
Canceled.
Trump fined $10,000 by the judge for breaking the gag order in his civil trial. In Fulton County, prosecutors reportedly discussing plea deals with 6 other defendants. They want that big fish, baby. The death toll from the hurricane in Acapulco, Mexico hits at least 27. And lastly, North Carolina's new Republican gerrymandering could flip 3 House seats in favor of the GOP. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Well, it's the EmMajority Report, as it's been a little bit more frequently these days, with Sam out in Vegas, the Torts Conference, now jury duty, but he will be back with us on Friday. I'm pleased to officially announce. Will be nice for him to do a little bit of the talking. I'm sick of talking. I'm sick of hearing my own voice. So annoying. But you guys have to listen to it, so...
I mean, I even noticed my voice going out last night on Left Reckoning because I've been talking more as the second mic on this show because Sam's been gone. And yeah, I'm ready to, take a little back seat.
Yeah, you want to come off the bench for the next few days. I would like to as well. Soon enough. October 2023 is going to go down as one of the darkest months in the history of the modern world. This has been a very, very difficult time. And now more horror. In Maine, there is a manhunt underway involving basically, hundreds of police officers. People were told to stay off the street last night in Maine. after there were shootings. The nature of them are still unclear, but at the very least, there were two, one at a bowling alley and a bar in Lewiston. It's believed that the shootings were perpetrated by the same man. The person of interest is named Robert Card of Bowdoin. He is allegedly somebody who has had mental health struggles that were documented in the past, including, and again, this is not confirmed at this point, but outlets are reporting it, including being committed to a mental health facility over the summer. He has also reportedly made threats of shootings previously. And as of now, the death toll is 18, dozens injured, over 60 at the very least. And the search is still underway at the time of this show airing. This is the 34th mass killing in the United States this year, when you define mass killings as 4 or more dead, as the Washington Post mass shooting desk defines it. Here is one of the reactions last night. Again, the story is evolving, but Newt Gingrich went on Sean Hannity's show and attempted to tie this to Israel. This is what he had to say. And as always, when these incidents, these mass shootings happen, it's always about something else except for the common sense gun control that we need.
Newt Gingrich is with us. As you can see, Mr. Speaker, once again, we have a deadly shooting across the country. It seems like the number of fatalities is going up rather quickly here. News is a bit sketchy. Your reaction to the initial reports here?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's horrible.
Yep.
And I think that we're going to have to really think through a better method of protecting people. Frankly, in states that have concealed carry and other permits, constitutional carry permits, you have a much more rapid response to these kind of people who are crazy. We have no idea what this person's motivation was, but I think we have to assume as we move forward that people, and by the way, this also applies to what happened in Israel when Hamas attacked. We have to have a greater ability for our citizens to protect themselves, because it's clear the law enforcement comes in after the massacre, but the law enforcement's almost never there to stop the massacre. This has been true in Europe. It's been true here. It's been true in Israel.
True in Europe. True in Europe. Want to look up some of the statistics on mass shootings in Europe? Who has weapons of war in many European countries? I mean, there have been mass shootings done in other countries in the world. And for example, when it happened in New Zealand, the Christchurch massacre, the government responded by immediately cracking down on the ownership and selling of weapons of war. It's incredible to be like, my entire adult life, this has been the reaction from the Republican Party when these mass shootings occur. And Biden, after this, urged Congress to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. That is the kind of weapon that this shooter was accused of using. Still not confirmed, but it seems, based on the carnage, to be a fair assumption. And I'm sure Biden's getting that information from a source that knows what they're talking about here. And there has been polling on this issue. A majority of Americans support banning assault weapons. That was a Fox News poll from April. 61% is the figure, and they're going to frame those questions in a way that's even more favorable, I would say, to the conservative point of view. But then you get to issues like background checks, which this guy would not have passed, probably. It depends, I guess, on the timeline, but in theory, it's possible that someone like him, who has had issues in the past with mental health and making threats about doing shootings, allegedly, I mean, he could have been flagged, and that has 87% support.
Owning a weapon like this, we should. First of all, I don't think they should even be produced and sellable. But like, to the extent that we are going to allow it, the idea that there isn't a huge investment with the state and that people can just go get one of these things for whatever reason and take it into a bowling alley is why we have this problem and other countries don't.
And Maine has very lax gun control laws, by the way. So if Newt Gingrich really wants to make this case, I mean, it's just not applicable in regards to Maine. In the past, Bernie Sanders had been called soft on gun control because of his stance on not suing, I believe, gun manufacturers in Vermont. And part of that is because Maine, Vermont, they have a bit of a different, culture than other New England and northeastern states when it comes to gun ownership. It's a more rural environment, and guns are more of an issue that voters care about. And so I bring that back to the polling here. Polling in a vacuum, unfortunately, is not proof of really anything, because people can support or not support things when asked straight up questions from a pollster. But what matters is whether or not people vote based on their stances about the questions asked in those polls. We see it positively affecting Democrats when it comes to trans issues, right? Not every trans issue polls well when you ask the general American public. But people, even when they are bigoted towards trans people, those people are already voting for Republicans, and the people that are on the margins aren't voting based on that issue. And when it comes to guns, it's really the opposite effect. Most Americans fundamentally understand that we have a sickness in this country when it comes to gun control and the lack of it. And yet, the minority here is the lobby that pulls the strings and has an entire party that is diligent and responsive to it, as you see with Newt Gingrich's immediate response there. So, not Matt Gingrich, but Matt Leck. Did you want to say something?
47% of Maine households have guns. That puts them above Wisconsin, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kansas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Utah, Nebraska, Minnesota, Michigan, Colorado, North Carolina. Like, it's not because there's a lack of guns in the state.
And to that point as well, Matt, per Shannon Watts, the founder of Moms Demand Action, Maine does not require background checks on all gun sales, have a red flag law, does not prevent domestic abusers from accessing guns, does not ban assault weapons, does not limit magazine capacity, does not require concealed carry permits, does not restrict open carry, and does not have a waiting period to purchase weapons.
Well, there you go. And I mean, this is why, by the way, this all needs to be federalized, because conservatives like to blame certain states for their lax gun laws or for their gun control laws, but mass shootings still happening, right? Like they'll point to Chicago, for example, and Illinois. But the reality is that when it's not federalized, then you can just go over the border and get the gun that you want. Right. It's about the sale and manufacturing of these things. I mentioned that background check polling there just to show how, universal the desire is to do something. But I feel that largely that is one of the least important priorities when it comes to really making a dent in gun violence in this country. It is the weapons themselves. It's the sale and manufacturing of these weapons, the fact that it's allowed, the fact that people can purchase it in this country. It should be made illegal. We draw lines. You can't buy a grenade launcher. You can't buy a tank on the open market. You can't buy all of these things that cause mass destruction and death.
And if we can't ban it, make it a feast for lawyers. Make these companies liable for people being shot.
Exactly. Bowling alleys. So, I mean, again, need to reiterate, we have this is a developing story. More information will come out about this the shooter and the death toll here. But once again, it seems like Republicans are trotting out the exact same playbook that they do every time, which is to put their heads in the sand and pretend that trying nothing is a better alternative than
or buy a gun,
trying anything, or buy a gun.
Yeah, you the viewer, go buy a gun.
Empower yourself through your purchases. That's Republican 101. All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we are going to be talking to Katie J. Wells about Uber and how they took over in cities across America. Be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by Dr. Katie J. Wells, geographer at Georgetown University, co-author of Disrupting D.C, The Rise of Uber and the Fall of the City, which she co-wrote alongside do you mind saying the names of your co-authors?
Absolutely. Kafui Acho and Declan Cullen.
Wonderful, wonderful. Katie, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Great to be here, Emma.
So, Washington, D.C. was the first city that you write about to really formally resist Uber, and 2011 is the year when Uber first approached them, and that's a lot of what your work focuses on here. And you and your co-authored worked with drivers in D.C. in 2016, and that helped kind of shape the narrative here. But before we get to that, I'd love to start from the beginning. From a national perspective, how did Uber explode in the United States? What were the conditions that really led to the takeover of this tech company that, pretends it's a car service but doesn't want any of that oversight that goes with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's several important conditions to understand why is it that Uber has become the common sense solution that it is. And one of that has to do with car service, the state of car service regulation in the US, which was really heavily deregulated already by 2011. So the state of chauffeured services or taxis, they weren't great, right? And so you couple that with the Great Recession, which meant that there was a huge number of people struggling with underemployment. And you also have sort of a rush of money that needs to find a place to go from Silicon Valley. You take those conditions, you add in decaying mass transit, and a huge number of people with disposable incomes that had these new machines in their pockets called smartphones. And suddenly you have sort of recipe for the rise of Uber.
Yeah, you mentioned the Great Recession there. I mean, on its face, my initial reaction would be, well, with the recession and all of the layoffs and unemployment, this kind of gig work is a prime to borrow from Naomi Klein, it's a shock doctrine situation where there's a vulnerability that is exploited by this company where people are desperate and need to make money quickly. Is that a fair reading of how Uber began to get a foothold?
Absolutely, exactly. And we actually, sort of use the work of geographer Ruth Wilson Gilmore to talk about Uber as a geographic solution to social and economic crisis, much the way Naomi Klein looks at these sort of shifts in capital and how they shape, the way we respond to them.
Right. It is. I hadn't really thought about it in that way before. But your book does a great job of laying that out, and also being critical of the neoliberal politics that even preceded that moment. Let's go back really to the 1980s and how some of those conditions that were created in cities set the table for this kind of work.
Yeah, that's great. So the reality is Uber didn't cause the problem, right? It just came in and benefited from it. And we want to be clear about that, right? In the 1980s, there was all kinds of federal defunding of cities, right? There was an abandonment of sorts. So you can look at all kinds of cities that didn't have great transit systems, that didn't have great options, especially when it came to racial inequality, didn't options in terms of how they responded to it. And so policymakers really, as well as cities from the 1980s, were really stymied. They had very limited toolboxes in which to address the crises they were facing.
Yeah, I mean, and can you expand on that a little bit? What the political situation was like that caused this disinvestment in cities?
Yeah, I mean, we can actually go back to the beginning, the founding of our country, right? It has been anti-urban. Let's do it, okay? In the founding, 1780s, right? The initial Congress and sort of the get-go of first imaginings of what American life would be like, it was heavily structured against cities, right? Funding for cities was limited. Many of them were underfunded, and many of them still are today. So over the years and decades, there have been periods where cities got funding, like the 1960s. But by the 1980s, that was waning, right? And so there was white flight. There was a huge, we can watch after, the civil rights movement, a huge defunding of things like public pools, golf courses, all kinds of amenities, but also basic ones like grocery stores in all areas of the city, or bus stops or transit.
Right. And is that, how explicitly racist was that effort of disinvestment? We're in this Reagan era too, right? Of capitalist worship, and so pairing that white flight, disinvestment in cities, I think it paints a clear picture of structural racism.
Absolutely. And I think we can look at the work of Kevin Cruz or others who have documented how places in Georgia, for instance, were explicitly racist in their decision to not fund particular urban infrastructure anymore. But I want to be careful to not mark it as something explicitly of Reagan, right? We also have Carter, who was starting to do these public-private partnerships. And so when we saw Uber come in 2011, 2012, we thought, on one hand, maybe this is just a new public-private partnership. But it felt like something different was afoot. And so that's why we think that it marks sort of an exacerbation of this trend.
Right.
It's sort of like...
Right. I mean, and it does seem kind of like it's the apex of these dynamics that you speak about here. In your book, you talk about this term technological solutionism, and this being a hallmark or an example of that very dynamic, which is a neoliberal tendency, I would say. Can you expand on that definition for our audience, what that means in practice?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very simple thing, and I think I've adhered to it much of my whole life, this idea of technological solutionism, right? It's wonderful to have a washing machine wash your clothes and eliminate the need to hire someone to do that or do that work yourself, right? Technology is supposed to help us live better lives. The reality is, and the danger is, when we allow it to sort of offer up really limited solutions, it inhibits our ability to come up with better options. And so there is a fantasy, certainly in the Obama years, that technology is going to, be our way forward to these really messy structural problems. But technology is still, at the end of the day, a machine, a tiny little limited machine that can only do what its, makers set it to do. So it's embedded with politics and power imbalances. And so technological solutionism is sort of pretending like those power imbalances don't exist.
It's not a coincidence, then, that so many Obama staffers seem to went and Jay Carney worked for Uber, right? Or did he work for Amazon? No, he worked for Amazon. I forget. Yeah. But there were other... Plouffe. Sorry?
David Plouffe.
Yes, right, exactly. I mean, the connection between that era of Democratic Party insider / Obama administration official and the promulgation of Uber, I think that's incredibly notable.
Yeah, and I don't blame them, right? On some level, we found this with the 30 D.C. area policymakers we followed for 5 years, right? They had sort of the fantasy or the belief that maybe this could help, right? They were not sort of, they did not see the problems of urban life, that they fell for this crappy solution. I don't know, it's hard to blame them, right? But a decade out now, we're ready to blame them.
Right, exactly. So I guess now we'll turn to D.C. and the efforts in 2011 to resist. What is that story? It ended up obviously not being successful, but the lessons learned, the important takeaways from that fight, and really how it played out.
Yeah, absolutely. So Uber entered DC like it did many cities in late 2011, and it abided by this idea of move quickly and break things, which for Uber meant don't actually follow the law. So it enters illegally in many places.
No other tech platform has ever done that, right? I mean, I've just completely memory hold Theranos, but anyway, sorry, continue.
How about railroads? I mean, we can gold mine. Yeah,
totally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long history of an attitude coming out of Silicon Valley that it's better to ask permission or ask forgiveness rather than permission. So when Uber arrived, there was sort of a lone, in our telling, there's a lone regulator who was really worried about its implications for the city. His name was Ron Linton. He was a lifelong regulator, and he set up and starred in his own sting to show the city, actually, we have a huge problem here and we need to figure out what to do about Uber. When he had a driver fined and the car impounded from this Uber drive that he had, sort of videotaped with journalists, he was right to bring it to the fore. What I don't think he imagined happening was sort of a denouncement of regulation as a public good, right? DC was struggling with this question. What should we do about Uber? Should we turn it to actually follow the law, change Uber? Should we change the law to follow Uber? And then there was this other view, which was whatever you do, please don't make the city out to look like anti-tech dinosaurs. And so the debates about Uber were always sort of wrapped up in these questions about urban economic competitiveness and the city's desire to make it look like an inclusive Silicon Valley. And by inclusive, I mean racially diverse.
How does that branding begin to happen? Because the taxi model, right? I mean, I'll take not the United States, New York, for example, because we've had actions by cab drivers, including horrifically a suicide in front of City Hall with a sign taped to him basically saying, I blame the government for ruining my livelihood, because in New York City, you have to purchase medallions. It's an investment in your own kind of personal business for a taxi cab. And when Uber just came in and took over, immediately tens of thousands of New Yorkers, I don't have the exact figures, Bradley, maybe you can look up the how many taxi drivers there are in New York City, but their livelihood went away. And was that something similar that was happening in DC? Where was there resistance? Were they being listened to?
Yeah. So, and remember that one suicide was one of at least 8 in a year, right? What we were seeing, right, was workers that were saddled with debt. They were underwater with investment they had made. And I think the parallels to the subprime mortgage crisis were huge in terms of who was getting protected and who wasn't, right? But there were also parallels at that time, right, to thinking about Indian farmers, right, that were committing suicide because their livelihoods had suddenly shifted amongst sort of economic forces. And they had looked to the government, and the government was looking out the window. So in DC, we had a little bit of a different situation. Certainly many, many workers we talked to were saddled with debt as Uber arrived, but it was less intense as that in New York because we did not have the medallion system. And we also had a system where we had about 116 different companies were operating. It wasn't sort of the big cartel model.
Right.
Which, you know, has its pluses and minuses. That the real downside meant that DC taxi workers weren't able to mount a really meaningful challenge to this new intruder.
And how, I don't know the racial complexion of DC taxi drivers, but it seems like odd to deploy a racial equity argument in favor of Uber. I don't want to go as far as to say it's deeply cynical, but maybe I will, because it's totally a fig leaf for just cheaper labor practices.
Absolutely. So that was one of the hardest things to figure out, given DC's really radical Black history and sort of strong record of trying to imagine a really full kind of racial justice that included economic justice. It felt so gross to watch Uber as a company come in and tell people, we will solve racial justice when we think of you as a consumer. And by you, I mean sort of Black residents, but not thinking about the fact that it was a Black majority immigrant workforce that it was displacing, right? So Uber on one hand is saying, we're going to address racial justice as long as you think of racial justice just in terms of the consumer, right? Your ability to get a taxi, because certainly there were complaints that taxis were racist, that they weren't willing to pick up, Black individuals. There was a lot of concern because they were a majority Ethiopian and Eritrean community against the African-American customers. So there were real issues there, right? We don't want to discount that question of hailing while Black. And yet the argument that Uber made and the vision that it and Spike Lee and others have sort of celebrated involves such a really narrow reading of what racial justice looks like. And it doesn't take into consideration this idea of economic justice and workers being people who also need racial justice.
It is deliberately narrow to just focus on the, one of the more acute experiences that non-white people face when trying to hail a taxi, right? Like that's just such a front-facing example of the deep structural inequalities that lead to systemic racism, and they're using that to disempower a population of workers who were in a more stable position. So it's a really, I would say, thwarting and not terribly honest way to go about business, but it seems like a lot of cities bought it.
Yeah, they did buy it, right? And they bought it because they didn't actually have solutions themselves, right? And there was also the issue of the disability rights community, right? Saying on one hand, taxis are not addressing our needs, right? The city is not addressing our needs. And so maybe Uber will come in and help disabled folks get access to better mobility.
Right.
Now, we haven't found that to be the case, but certainly who doesn't want to hope for a better solution?
Absolutely. And can you talk a bit about how when Uber was trying to disrupt the market, they made their prices cheaper so that people began to use Uber, and that must have been an incredible shock to cab and taxi drivers throughout many cities.
It was, absolutely. It was also a shock to policymakers. They didn't know what to do with it, right? Wait, is this a gift? Are they giving us something? What do they want in return, right? But what we soon found out, what they wanted in return was something that they sort of unveiled in DC, sort of this playbook of clicktivism, right? Where suddenly the company was able to text every single one of its users and say, please let the council, the DC council, our governing body, know that you absolutely do not want the price of your cab, your Uber, to go up.
Right.
And that was this shocking moment. And oh my God, they use the phrase Operation Rolling Thunder, which of course refers to a U.S. military bombing campaign of Vietnam.
Yeah. Yikes.
But that's how they described that was their code name for their first DC battle, using this collectivism model.
I mean, it's a way to imbue yourself with some sense of heroism when you're really just a tech person trying to make a lot of money. Interesting window into the psychology there. So in 2012, DC legislators, I should say, introduced the Uber Amendment. What happened there? Why did it fail? What was that period of time like?
Yeah, so there was a moment in 2012 where DC legislators were concerned with questions about disability rights, and they were floating this question of maybe we should require these new chauffeur services, Uber, Lyft, Sidecar, to uphold the American Disabilities Act and uphold the requirements of all other transportation companies. Now that failed. There was also an attempt in that Uber amendment to require a price floor to try to protect taxi services, to say maybe Uber is a luxury service and we should make sure that it's, at a higher rate. We should also make sure that it's paying a tax to the city that is equal without a chauffeur services. It should share its data so we understand its effects, right? It's really hard for government to regulate something it can't see, which is the case of many of these companies. But all those proposals, right, they flopped.
Yeah.
And thanks to Operation Rolling Thunder.
Last question. You did spend time with drivers and got some insights into their experience. What would you like our audience to know about what it's like to be a driver for Uber in DC?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we spent about 5 years tracking 40 drivers as they moved on and off the apps. And I think one of the things we learned, especially during the COVID pandemic, is the extent to which Uber is a solution for them, right? One driver, Diana, said to us, Uber helps me at my time of need. And I think what I would want listeners, of the Majority Report to think about with these stories about Uber drivers is what is it that we need to do so that Uber no longer is a solution for these workers, let alone the customers? What kind of a city do we need to build, or what kind of expectations do we need to have so that Uber isn't the pernicious solution that it is?
Right. I mean, it starts with making people's lives more secure. And so they don't have to, on their off time, try to make money by driving for Uber. I mean, it all starts with these propositions that we're seeing, undercutting benefits for gig workers, I would say. We have a long way to go. And unfortunately, Uber has a really big head start in what they tried to do.
No, and I think the important thing is these Uber drivers, right? They're in some ways a symptom of the failings of our labor markets, but they're also a harbinger or warning of what we're about to, face.
Absolutely. Dr. Katie J. Wells, the book is Disrupting D.C, The Rise of Uber and the Fall of the City. Really appreciate your time today. We'll put a link to your book that you co-wrote along with
Kafuyato
and Declan Cullen. I apologize. And we'll put a link to that in the description wherever you're listening to or watching this and at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Emma.
All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we'll be back with Alex Sammon to break down this new crazy ass Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. We are back, and we are joined now by Alex Sammon, again, a friend of the show, politics writer at Slate, on his latest piece for Slate about new House Speaker Mike Johnson, entitled "Somehow There's Finally a New Speaker of the House." Alex, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And I also will say you have a piece out in Harper's that everybody should check out. And I've heard great things from Bradley, so maybe we'll have you back on to discuss that at some point, and we'll put a link to that in the description as well. But we had some breaking news yesterday, and I immediately saw your piece and thought that you would be the best person to come on to break this freak down. Mike Johnson, new Speaker of the House. Who saw it coming? I mean, seriously, I thought that they would be doing this infighting for the next few weeks, and this guy Mike Johnson is fairly nondescript, but at the same time, man, does he hold some extremist positions.
Yeah, it's such an interesting process because I think actually even House Democrats didn't really know who he was until he was the speaker. Certainly, Senate Republicans had no idea who he was, and many of them said so after the vote. So it's not just you and I who know little about him. It's like most of his congressional colleagues don't know very much about him. This obviously was a total whirlwind where his name was floated, and then minutes later he got the job. So I think the last sort of 24 hours or less has been a bunch of quick and excited research by both sides. I think Democrats have found a lot that they think is worth noting, and obviously Republicans think that there's a lot to like. So an interesting guy, certainly.
Yeah, and the concern was, and why, there are 18 Republicans that are in districts that Biden won that are worried about their seat come 2024. And they were immensely concerned about the prospect of someone like Jim Jordan being the Speaker of the House, given what that would mean for ads that were run in their districts and his kind of front-facing association with Trump, and obviously the issues with the sexual assault cover-up, allegedly, with the Ohio State wrestling team. And so that's kind of what sunk him, right? Scalise didn't have the extremists. Jim Jordan was too extreme. No one really cared about Emmer. And then all of a sudden, this guy comes out, and Mike Johnson, got every Republican vote. But he's just as extreme as Jim Jordan. And that's the thing that I don't understand.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? He's the first Republican to win every Republican congressional vote in a speaker race since Boehner in 2011. So this is the most unified we've ever seen the conference, in theory. And right, he's not I mean, I think that what this boils down to is he's not literally a member of the Freedom Caucus, and that's basically all that moderates could Republican moderates, quote unquote, could get out of this. And he's a little less abrasive than Jim Jordan. But, if you look through the positions, I mean, this stuff is, sort of as rebarbative and impossible to defend on a national level as anything Jordan put himself up for. It's, you go down the list, but, this is someone who is basically the brains behind the Trump coup attempt. He was like the architect of that. Extreme positions on abortion, extreme positions on all sorts of social issues, gay marriage. He's not even really into legal no-fault divorce. I mean, we're talking really, really fringe positions on social issues, and every Republican voted for this, and they're going to have to wear it now. And I think, even listening to him talk in the first 24 hours, there's no substance, there's no questions answered, there's no policy brief. It's literally just, this is the time for prayer. And
that's the thing. So his extremism versus Jordan, if we're going to really try to parse out what the brands are, is Jordan is in your face on Judiciary Committee, front facing, mad at the Democrats. This guy's very quiet. He has not been very public facing, but he appears to be in the vein of religious extremism that, say, Mike Pence embodied as vice president under Trump. Is that a fair kind of conclusion to draw based on some of his statements about abortion? And he wanted to once criminalize gay sex, and right. It seems very extreme from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the evangelicals have got their man again here. So it's, Pence is a Catholic, right? Mike Johnson is an evangelical. This is truly one of their own, and incredibly extreme on every level. And even just sort of look at the way he's risen through the ranks of Republican politics, and was a legal champion for abortion bans in Louisiana. That's kind of how he made his name. Prior to that, he was legal representation for like a creationist museum. Like he's probably the most prominent creationist, like young earth creationist in the country now. And that's really how he like cut his teeth, was trying to win tax breaks for creationist museums. So, this goes all the way back, and you just issue after issue. It's like mass shootings are caused by abortion, and after Katrina, looting was caused by social degeneracy that was brought on by legalized gambling, and like, it's just like, obviously there are a bunch of Democratic Oppo researchers who are diving through this stuff right now gleefully, but I don't even think Republicans knew by and large who this guy really, really is, or at least his track record over 20 plus years.
Yeah, I mean, were they just sick of it? They're just crying uncle and they just wanted to move on? Is that probably how this ended up happening? Or, at the same time, is he just so inoffensive on a personal level that, primarily this whole saga was born out of pettiness, and right. Them not being able to be petty about this guy might have been what did him, brought him to the top, although he would probably thank God for that.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's
and I think he did. Right. Yeah.
No, I think actually it is so simple as to say that like he didn't insult the Republican moderates to their face during the conference speeches. Like he's just not, the fact that he is soft spoken is pretty much all they sort of had to hold on to here. And like more than 3 weeks into this, the alternatives that were coming up are, McCarthy reinstalled with Jim Jordan as his assistant, or power sharing agreement with the Democrats. Like the options were looking very, very dire, and there were so many people who had been scratched off the list already. I think it sort of was like, right, what else can you do? This guy can get these votes, and then you just try to spin it afterwards. And so we've seen like No Labels already put together a press call where they were like, this is not a Trump Republican. Like this is like a real sort of like moderate conservative.
Are we serious?
That's how they're spinning it. That's the approach.
I hope that, No Labels needs to go into the dustbin of history, but I don't understand that because, Lincoln Project type Republicans or centrist third way types, they seem to draw the line at the election denial, right? And this guy, Mike Johnson, was one of the foot soldiers in formalizing the efforts to overturn the Democratic results of the 2020 election in the House. Talk a bit about what his role was and how intimately involved he was in legitimizing election denial.
Yeah, pretty much at the vanguard of this whole campaign. It was, the lawyer. One of the lawyers, obviously, who worked on the legal strategy. He helped sort of build the amicus brief that the Trump team was working with to try to overturn those results. Was intimately involved with the lawsuit in Texas to help facilitate this. And so, sort of at every level of the legal strategy was there consulting and drawing it up. And then also is like totally unreconstructed on this point. Like has at no point said, oh, actually, that was wrong. Trump was wrong. There was a mistake. He still, if you listen to his podcast that he does with his wife, is steadfast in this position. So, yeah, is this not a Trump Republican? Of course it is. And in fact, Trump paved the way for him to get this position by taking out Tom Emmer just a couple of days ago. So, yeah, that's a tough sell. I think that's going to be, that really strains credulity to say, oh, yeah, this guy's never Trump guy, just because I think in 2015 he said something that along the lines of like, oh, it would be great to have someone with a little more moral character or rectitude or whatever in the White House. That's not who he is in 2023.
Right. I mean, the fact that he was so dogged about it and so ideologically committed to overturning the election should raise alarm bells. Although at the same time, whoever the speaker is beholden to the election deniers in the caucus regardless. So the figurehead part means something, but in practice, it's the whole caucus that you have to worry about. And the stuff that will matter, I think, is for the Democrats in terms of a political attack once 2024 comes. And then also, of course, this upcoming issue with the budget, which is mere weeks away. What is your sense of what he is going to demand in terms of cuts, or would this person be open to some sort of continuing resolution or continuation of the budget, given like the fact that the Democrats hold the Senate and the presidency?
Yeah, we don't really know, which is so crazy. The actual substantive issues that were supposed to be resolved by getting rid of McCarthy obviously haven't been resolved, and he has said nothing that would indicate that there's a consensus position on this. I think, his backers, the fact that he came out of the Republican Study Committee, would indicate that he's going to push for cuts. He's not going to be someone who's going to say, let's just, prolong this. Let's do a clean resolution. Let's keep this rolling. I think it's, if you're reading the tea leaves, it's they're going to be pushing for big cuts again. That didn't work, 3 weeks ago. Why is it going to work now? Obviously none of these things have ultimately been resolved. And I don't know that we have any indication other than the fact that they would like to see bigger cuts that we're going to have any consensus position on any of this stuff. I mean, it's so fascinating to me because what we replace McCarthy with someone who is going to be forced to do the same thing McCarthy did, and certainly is in a much weaker position to do it. Like, this is not someone who has counted votes. He's never had a committee chairmanship. He's never had a leadership position of any real substance. Like, I don't know. Is this guy going to be able to do something McCarthy couldn't do? McCarthy had had a lot of money. That's I think is an important part of this too.
That was my next question, because the way McCarthy rose to power was the fact that he could hand out checks. He was one of the best fundraisers in the Republican Party, being from California, liberal, blue, degenerate state, but that has a lot of wealthy people in it, and they were writing checks. And that was part of how he rose to power. You write about this in Slate. His fundraising, I mean, he does not have a fundraising apparatus. McCarthy was a great fundraiser for the Republicans. Scalise, who was next up, also raises a good amount of money for the Republican Party. And there is not that track record here for Mike Johnson. Is that a concern for some of the Republicans? We know they love their big money checks.
Right. I mean, for me, it's just confounding. It's like, McCarthy, right, is an incredible fundraiser for all of his foibles and his drawbacks and his inabilities. Like, he brought in a ton of money and made Republicans really competitive in a lot of these races because of that. If you're looking at Mike Johnson, if you just look at the Louisiana delegation right there, Steve Scalise is from there. He was the second in command. He couldn't get the job. And then you have to say, like, Garrett Graves from Louisiana is also probably higher ranking just in terms of Republicans from Louisiana in the House. And Mike Johnson is maybe third in that state. I mean, that's like saying, like, the third best player, like the Indiana Pacers, is now the face of basketball. It's like, it's such a crazy move. And he's raised $500,000 this cycle. It's like, where's the fundraising going to come from? That's a huge part of the operation here. Like, we're not going to be moving legislation in this Congress. Like, that's just not part of the deal with the divided the Democratic Senate. So, I mean, if you're a Republican, what's the long-term vision here? I don't think that, like, the creationist museum money is going to float the entire party. And you even just look at some of his the other industries in Louisiana, like the oil and gas industry has said, like, he's not one of their guys. Like, he's from Shreveport. He's not, it's like you go down the list and it's like, where's this money going to come from? It's totally unclear to me. I think that is actually, even more so than the, sort of the day one bluster and the craziness of all of this, is like the long-term impact of this doesn't seem to be very well thought out.
Absolutely not. You mentioned his stance on no-fault divorce. Can you expand on that? Because seems to be kind of a thing for the manosphere types. Steven Crowder also very against no-fault divorce for obvious reasons. But it indicates that he's I don't know, pretty controlling and resentful of women. So that is of interest to me as a woman.
To the right of John Milton on this.
Yeah. Concerning. Very concerning.
Yeah, and really, I think, again, like a true believer in this stuff. This is not someone who is a Johnny come lately to hating no fault divorce. This is someone who has a lifelong record of fitting that in between his trenchant opposition to abortion and gay sex and gay marriage and all these other sort of signs of social degeneracy in the far right evangelical world. So yeah, it's an interesting position to hold and to defend nationally. Going to be, I think, a real challenge to make that one persuasive to the majority of Americans.
For people that do not know, no-fault divorce just essentially allows people to leave a marriage without having to give a reason, and it's put in place really to allow women often to escape some abusive marriages, and it's helpful in that regard. Many states have adopted it, and so it's quite retrograde to be in opposition to that kind of thing. I guess lastly here, I mean, the thing that was interesting about the last few weeks on this topic is that Republicans really showed what their true priorities were here. Emmer, his nomination sunk because conservative Republicans did not like his vote on the legislation that Biden signed into law protecting gay marriage from the legislative perspective, right? Not just from what the Supreme Court did, which is a good thing. We needed to do that with abortion, and we were unable to do so. But Emmer voted for it. Emmer voted in favor of the gay protection of gay marriage, same-sex marriage, I should say, and interracial marriage as well. This is not the ideology of somebody like Johnson. So in terms of protecting trans people and gay people, this seems concerning, especially if the Republicans, God forbid, take back the Senate and take back the presidency in 2024, and the map for the Democrats on the Senate side is not looking as good as it had in previous years. This could be a leadership that is very hostile to both gay people and trans people as well.
Right. I mean, in a lot of ways, right, the agenda, the Republican agenda is very short. Like, if we're ultimately talking about what they would do if they took the presidency, the House, and the Senate, which is not inconceivable at all. Like, they've got most everything they've ever dreamed of, right? So they might cut taxes again on the wealthy and big corporations, but probably they're going to go after these like minority groups, and that's queer and trans people. That's that's immigrants. It's the sort of persecution of minority populations is going to be very, very high on the list because there isn't that much on the list, period. And I think that is a real concern because that stuff is not sort of just it's not just advertising or whatever. It's not just messaging. It's like that's a core part of the agenda at this point because they've won everything else. And I think that is actually genuinely a very sort of fearful proposition in a lot of ways.
All right. Well, let's hope their dysfunction continues to get in their own way. The Republicans are good at that as well. But Alex Sammon, politics writer at Slate, the piece is called "Somehow There's Finally a New Speaker of the House." And everybody check out the long form piece that Alex wrote in Harper's called "Forbidden Fruit: The Anti-Avocado Militias of..." You're going to have to pronounce that word for me.
Michoacán, yeah.
Michoacán. Yeah. We will put the link to both of these pieces in the description wherever you're listening to or watching this. Thanks so much, Alex. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. All right, folks. With that, we are going to wrap up the first hour of this program and head into the fun half where we'll be joined by...
It'll be so fun. Well, actually, our friends are going to be here.
Our friend, right. Not just like Matt and I trading venom back and forth. Righteous venom, but still. The number is 646-257-3920. We will take your calls in the fun half. Also, this program relies on your support. If you have appreciated our coverage over these past few weeks, and I've loved the responses that we've seen. To be honest, it's what keeps us going. And if you have some disposable income, it would be wonderful if you could support us. Become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Keeps the lights on, keeps us working.
It's good to have a little bit of independent source because you don't know how long this sort of conflict continues. And maybe YouTube decides, look at this content. It is anti-Semitic. We are going to cut down on that. There are
accounts being taken down on Instagram.
There are people that are advocating for a lot of this now, and I think it is a huge concern. And so I just support all the media that you value and don't rely on the ad-supported model to keep it alive, because that can be giveth and taketh away.
Much appreciated.
And we have many we have a lot of support on the outside, obviously, in terms of our YouTube operation, our TikTok operation, our newsletter operation. It's not just us, but it's four of us here.
Yeah.
Doing this show every day.
Yeah.
It's literally four of us trying to make our way through an extremely difficult, complicated, nuanced geopolitical conflict.
Yeah. I think but I mean, you say that, Bradley, but we also have the power to reconstitute the left. And that's kind of...
I didn't say we weren't extremely powerful. I'm just saying it is only four of us. We possess a massive
We are demigods.
Yeah.
That's but even demigods
Hercules
need
was
to
only
eat.
one man.
I mean, yeah, you're right. Good point, Bradley. And on ESPN today, despite our incredible power in the political space, Bradley and I can't buy a win against the spread to save our lives. You can tune in, and we'll touch a little bit on the NBA starting as well.
About time.
Yeah. But it's the start of the season is when I'm just getting into it. Once football's over, that's when basketball and hockey really take their place in my heart. I mean,
sure. Long
seasons.
Yeah, whatever.
All right.
Wemby just drilling threes.
I watched a little of that. He is, it's like seeing a different, like an alien in person.
It really does look like, things like this happen. It's like they change what you can accept in a video game.
Mm-hmm.
Like it used to be, you could never shoot from really far behind the 3-point line, and then Steph Curry started doing it in real life.
Right.
And now in the video game, you can do it. And Wemby is like if you made a creative player and made him as tall as they allowed you to, and also made him the stats of Paul George. It's crazy.
Right, exactly. It really is nuts. And I did watch a little bit of the Knicks Celtics game last night. Porzingis looking that good did not make me feel amazing. Not make me feel amazing on, especially at Madison Square Garden. Just
well, you're going to get Embiid in the next. Year
totally. So. Yeah, right. We've done this dance before. It seems like the Knicks are the number one team that agents use as leverage to get their teams traded to other teams. So, we'll talk about all of that stuff. youtube.com/ESPN show at 4 p.m. today. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, Left Reckoning. We had Derek Davison on to talk about the all this, hostage situations, the what this means for our standing in the world, as far as like, let's try to marshal support for maybe ending the Russia invasion of Ukraine. I guess, and make them have the world take when we say the words like democracy seriously. And I guess we're just not going to give a shit about that because it's more important to support the bombing of Gaza. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We also got into David Pakman, who called pretty loudly for accountability on Rashida Tlaib. I wonder if and he's been quiet since the stuff that he says was abundantly clear that it was a Hamas rocket. I don't think that was ever true, that you could say that. But he wanted accountability for people who are saying things that now look exceedingly plausible and where's the burden of proof. So we talked about that and got a little bit heated. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning if you want to hear that.
Do we have Brandon and Binder, or just there he is? We have Binder. What's up?
Hello.
Binder? How you doing?
Doing good. How are you guys?
I
heard that Matt Leck's over there beefing with David Pakman. Welcome to the club.
Oh, you are too?
I mean, my beef with Pakman goes years ago. He emailed me with a very stern email a while back after I said something on an episode of this show.
About what?
About
Topic.
Michael Brooks.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't like my telling of his, when I was on the episode where we were remembering Michael, he didn't like my telling my own personal feelings of how things went down when I first met Michael. He said he was very hurt by it because I said how, when I first met Michael, I was, cautious about him because he came from a more, democratic centrist sort of, like a Democrat centrist show. And then over the years, it became quite clear that he fit here at the Majority Report and not over at that show, just based on his politics.
I mean,
that was just my own personal. I didn't mean I didn't mean any hatred towards David. That was just my own personal retelling of events. And he sent me a email that day because, of course, that was the important thing at the time, not anything else. How he was very angry with me, and he was very hurt by it. And because I was in a nice mood, because, wanting to not hurt anybody's feelings at the time, for sure, I apologized for it and said I didn't mean anything by it. And then he let me know that he did not accept my apology. Which to me was incredible. Incredible.
How long had Michael been?
It was
for a little bit early on.
Dead at that point?
Not even days. That was literally
Jesus.
What I said was on the episode for his memorial.
I did not know this. And
yeah.
That is not great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe, yeah. I mean, I think it is. I mean, we can all be relieved that Michael fit better here at a place where we don't sort of run cover for Bolivia coup or what's going on in Gaza.
I mean, I knew there was nothing wrong with what I said because I didn't even mean anything by it at the time.
That's just uncontroversially true.
Right. But after seeing Pakman's takes recently, not only is it my opinion, but it is extremely clear that is fact. I mean, Michael has the exact opposite take on Pakman on this topic, and this topic was so near and dear and important to Michael that if he had never come to the Majority Report and was working with David Pakman this whole time, he would have undoubtedly left the program over this specific topic, no doubt about it.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, to just summarize, our problem is I find it really annoying that Pakman keeps putting, like he was with Steve Schmidt or whatever, and putting all of these critiques, like Israel's an apartheid state, into the mouth of like some sort of imaginary campus activist that is too enthusiastic and doesn't know the world, when actually it's Amnesty International and Ilham Papi.
It's the United
and
Nations.
Rashid Khalidi. Like, interact with adults that are talking about this instead of just running around and saying, oh, if you say apartheid, you don't know what words mean.
It's the Jewish Voice for Peace. It's If Not Now. I mean,
and I think he's been somewhat avoidant on the issue, but time's up on that.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that with us, Matt, because that is a story that
I didn't know that.
I did not know, and I think is notable and very, very uncool. So
I mean, people could just go back and watch the episode. I said it as like sort of like a humorous sort of thing to lighten the mood on a very sad day. It was very clear I didn't mean anything by it to Pac-Man. It was just like, you know, Michael fit here. This is where he was, and it fit into me and Michael constantly joking about Pac-Man's show that you know, when we were together at the Majority Report. So I mean, you know, but you know, and I even apologized because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings over it, and if he was hurt over it, then that was not my take. But then when he decided to make it clear to me that he did not accept it, I mean, he didn't have to accept it, but takes that extra step to email me to let me know he did not accept it.
Yeah.
Then that became clear to me that I don't care for Pac-Man, and I don't care that I hurt his feelings.
Beef is fine. There's no light without heat, and let's just let it be that way, and we can keep it on the issues, which I think, Binder, you're
Absolutely.
right about. Like he just very clearly is more of a centrist now. You're going on being lachrymose with Steve Schmidt instead of talking to adults. Like, have Barnaby Rain on. You want to talk about anti-Semitism? Give your audience something as opposed to impoverishing them with this sort of thing. It's guru-like, honestly. It's like the inability to deal, and Brian Butler's the same thing. Sorry to get off on a tangent while we're trying to do plugs, but Brian Butler writing this piece, Biden doesn't support genocide. You click on it expecting some sort of definition of genocide or some contention with experts who are calling it genocide. And no, it's just Israel. Biden doesn't support genocide because Israel isn't doing a genocide, you accelerationists. People need to get fucking serious. Hey, Brandon.
Brandon,
I want to say, no, thank you for having me. I want to say I'm instinctually on Matt Binder and Matt Lecht's side of this argument, even though I only caught the last little bit.
I mean, well, I don't understand how we're quibbling with genocide at this point. The only reason that we are not in the place of genocide right at this very moment is because, like, Biden is half-heartedly trying to stall the situation of a ground invasion, but Netanyahu and the Israeli government put their tanks over the border in northern Gaza and be like, hey, it's coming, don't you worry. And it's now 7,000 dead, almost 3,000 children dead, and we're talking in the span of less than 3 weeks. So at this rate, what are we talking about here?
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously you have all that evidence that a genocide is happening, but have you seen Israel tweeting that Voldemort would be on their side?
Yeah, I did see that.
And Jigsaw. I mean, it came from an AI thing, but people are saying like it is ethnic cleansing, not genocide. Go take it up with the genocide expert in Jewish currents. People just feel the need to just say things, and also like this sort of thing. This sort of abstract argument over terminology. It's more easy to say this or that than say like, oh yeah, actually I think killing 7,000 people, 3,000 kids, that's good. Whether you call it genocide, whether you want to call it ethnic cleansing, like
well, Netanyahu's saying we're the children of light and they're the children of darkness.
Exactly.
I mean, this is the most fascist stuff that we could possibly hear. Anyway.
No.
What's happening on your guys' programs? I'm sure I have a sense of what you probably were talking about. Binder, you go first, and then Brandon, then we'll head into the fun half.
Sure. So on Doom this week, obviously another week of talking about what's happening in Gaza, going through more disinformation spreading online, went through, how you're seeing people lose their jobs for speaking out against what's going on in Gaza. And I show two examples which are just so clearly nothing out of the ordinary, over the top. In one example, I'll give her, an editor-in-chief of a research magazine basically shared an Onion post talking about how the Onion is on point here, and that made him lose his job. The most you can't even get less controversial than that. I mean, and how, on the opposite side, you see people literally dehumanizing Palestinians, calling them animals, saying they all deserve to pay for Hamas. And there's no loss of anyone's livelihood or anything there. Like, no, there's no symmetry even on that. Like, it's just unbelievable, like how we're seeing this. So all that and more, youtube.com/Matt Binder. I'm assuming there'll be a scam economy episode very soon on the SBF trial, but I've honestly have had a hard time focusing on anything but all of this right now.
I totally understand. I'm like I have to will myself to give a shit about the speaker fight in the House.
Right. Right.
Brandon, what's happening on the discourse?
Well, if I can assemble my team, we will be getting together to talk about the Israel-Palestine. Well, you can't call it genocide. Apparently now ethnic cleansing is okay to do, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we will also be talking about the SBF trial. I'll make them talk about the SBF trial because I have been following that as well. Like I said last week, I've been using that as sort of a palate cleanser from all of the terrible opinions about Israel genociding Palestinians online, but it's its own atrocity, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, the number is 646-257-3920. We'll be taking your calls and reading your IMs. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Can we bring back DJ Danner?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck them.
Things I do for the bigger game plan.
By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
And back.
We are back, and we have opened up the phone lines. Spicy episode, but rightfully so. I mean, I don't even think we've touched on it, like the fact that, we just started talking, but there was a mass shooting last night too. It just feels like the world's on fire. So we'll try to have some fun today. We do have some clips for you, but I think everybody can understand the tone that everybody is feeling. And when you're in the news, like as well, we don't really have a choice except to consume all of this. And so it leads to, obviously, people feeling passionate about things. And I think that that's healthy.
Again, there's no light without heat.
Yep. Sam's OnlyFans says, "Hi, Emma and MR crew. Israel is a coward and a terrorist state, plain and simple. Anyone still doubting that in Gaza, I invite them to listen to how Israeli officials threaten to bomb Lebanon into the, quote, Stone Age if Hezbollah opens up a new front. They explicitly say that they will bomb Beirut, which is the capital and most dense area in Lebanon, although it is well known that Hezbollah's strongholds are in the mountainous regions in southern Lebanon near the borders with Israel." Yeah.
We need to be clear about this sort of new stage that we've reached in this the bloodbath, which is that yesterday Anthony Blinken told Al Jazeera. It was reported that Anthony Blinken told Al Jazeera to tone it down. The same day, and at least one Al Jazeera reporter had his family, where the place that his family was taking refuge, targeted and bombed. And he says they are targeting our families. Even I've seen an Israeli minister say that we generally know who's getting hit. For instance, we hit an Al Jazeera person's family yesterday. Now, maybe this is all fog of war, and it doesn't. And Israel isn't targeting the places where journalists' families are staying to bomb them. But that's not the only journalist whose family got hit yesterday. And I think it's despicable, and it's blood curdling, and it is really hard not to be super tense when you look at things like that.
Yep. State Line Rocco. Matt made a great point. A lot of these YouTube guys act like gurus instead of journalists. Yeah.
It's cowardice. Like, have Pappy on. I'm sure he would do it, David. Have Barnaby Rain on. Have somebody on who is going to challenge these things, as opposed to shadow boxing with these strawman college campus activists that are so overly enthusiastic and so unprincipled. Like, have some courage to deal with people who are actually calling this an apartheid state. Because, like, you look at his coverage of BDS and it's always this, you guys just don't understand it. You don't understand it. I would love to support BDS, but it's just not worked yet. You know what? When the South Africa boycott started, the fucking 50s.
I mean, a lot of what you're seeing also right now is like the flailing of and desperation, because I mean,
right? Because he wouldn't jump in.
Poll after poll is showing that the tide is turning here. That people are realizing that it isn't what's being portrayed on mainstream media, and on top of that, not only isn't it being portrayed, it's not too complicated for you to have an opinion on.
Yep.
You can see the deaths of children. You can see the deaths of innocent people and call it out. And no, that's wrong. There's no sort of additional information that you need that complicates the deaths of innocent people.
Now that we're on this topic, let's do a clip on it, I feel like, because we can just kind of bring our conversation into the context of others' statements here. So I think this is number 2 here, Bradley. Gillerman, yeah. Here is Sky News' Mark Austin, and former Israeli representative to the United Nations, Dan Gillerman. And Sky News is asking Gillerman about the blockade in Gaza. And just notice here the language that is used when he is speaking about Palestinians. He doesn't say Hamas here. He's talking broadly about the Palestinian people. And I think it's revelatory, and it indicates what we're really dealing with here.
I just want to ask you then about something else he said in his speech, which is about the collective punishment, as he put it, of the Palestinian people. And I want to talk about that in the context of the blockade and keeping fuel out of Gaza. I just wonder if you think that that is really necessary.
I'm very puzzled by the constant concern which the world and also Britain, I must say, Mark, is showing for the Palestinian people, and is actually showing for these horrible, inhuman animals who have done the worst atrocities that this century has seen.
Can you pause it?
The worst atrocities.
We need to go back. We're going back. We need to emphasize this. First of all, let's be clear here. The UK and the United States and the West is in some way sympathetic with the Palestinians right now. Are we joking? There were only 10 members of Congress in the United States who voted against the first bill that this new speaker brought up, which was about unequivocal support for Israel. They are voices that are marginalized, and then also almost formally so in efforts to censure people like Ilhan Omar for previously speaking out about the disproportionate bias that Israel receives in terms of both funding and media coverage in the West. But the truth is starting to get out, and they're anxious about that. But we have to go back. He's concerned.
I will say he's probably more so focused on the public opinion, and I will say the public opinion has clearly even had an effect on even mainstream media. We are seeing questions about the safety and care of what's going to happen to the innocent Palestinian civilians that we would have never seen in prior years.
They are losing control of the narrative.
Right.
We're also in a post Iraq War was bad era. Like, a lot of this stuff is just not made for an era where people have generally agreed that the Iraq War, that the imperialism that the United States engages in, and by people, I mean, people online and public opinion, but, the under 35s in the world grew up in a world where, like, we acknowledge that the Iraq War was bad, and not in the, like, the wishy-washy, but support our troops, but don't support the war way, where it's like, no, Iraq war was bad. There is mixed opinion on the Afghanistan invasion, but certainly it's not looked upon favorably now. And they just want to go back to a world where you can unequivocally oppress Muslims and Arab minorities and have everyone cheer you on and have no pushback for it.
And the thing is also that Palestinians have smartphones now. We're in an era where people can film exactly what's going on, and the Israeli government's efforts to control the narrative are successful in the sense that their electricity and fuel blockade has severely cut into the ability of Palestinians to share their stories and get footage out there, but it's not enough, and that's what he's freaking out about. And again, pay attention. He does not say Hamas here. He says the Palestinians.
I'm very puzzled by the constant concern which the world and also Britain, I must say, Mark, is showing for the Palestinian people, and is actually showing for these horrible, inhuman animals who have done the worst atrocities that this century has seen, and the worst atrocities that Jews have suffered since the Holocaust. I mean, when the United States reacted to 9/11, I don't remember people shedding tears for the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. Your country, Mark, Britain, actually joined them and even sent your royals to fight in Afghanistan. When the Ukrainians reacted to Russia's invasion, I don't remember people worrying about the poor Russian soldiers and whether they had enough food. All of a sudden, when it comes to Israel, everybody is becoming a great humanitarian, totally forgetting what happened 2.5 weeks ago, which is unforgettable and unforgiven.
The argument is basically,
this is not only conflation. This is not only conflating, Palestinian people with all sorts of dehumanizing language, but he also conflates them, the entire Palestinian people, with terrorist groups like Al Qaeda. Then he goes on to compare them to the Russian military. There was lots of concern. There was a whole anti-war movement that was concerned about innocent lives in Iraq and Afghanistan post 9/11. There were a lot of people who were even against the dehumanizing language of even the people that supposedly we were after, because people can do terrible things. You don't need to call them animals and dehumanize. Like, people are totally capable of doing bad things, but like it's just like the conflation of everything in an attempt to try to bring it back around to they're losing. They're just like flailing here.
Brandon, I know you wanted to say something. I'm gonna
I was just going to say, it just seems like his argument is that like the West got to commit atrocities before. How come they're going to stop us now?
Yep.
Like where was all the humanitarian? And I spoke on this before. It existed, but there wasn't so many smartphones. There weren't so many Twitter accounts. And it seems a little entitled to want to commit like genocide in apartheid states, but not want anyone to comment negatively online. But that's the era of fascism, and that's the era of imperialism that we live in, where not only is it enough that these people have to be fully in control of, countries, like fascists have to be in control of Israel and control of the United States of America. They also need you to support them in their goals, even if all the war protesters, millions of people can be on the street, not going to affect whether or not anybody, I'm not going to affect whether or not we fund Israel, not going to affect whether or not they bomb Palestinians, but they still want the moral victory as well.
Yeah, and let's be precise.
And like they're so outraged too about like the focus not being on what happened on October 7th, but like that's on them too. Like that's their fault too. Like
you've used it to
kill.
Yeah.
Right. I'm actually worried about the hostages. Like a lot of people are. Those are innocent people. A lot of them actually we're finding out as time goes on are actually quite sympathetic to what's going on in Gaza to begin with, even before all this. And you're hearing from their families, their poor families saying, telling their own government to care about my family member who's a hostage over there. And it's quite clear that the Israeli government does not care about those hostages, at least not as the priority.
No, they're bombing where they are.
They want the hostages to be added to the death count total so they can continue to serve as propaganda.
Yes, and then they'll eventually say it's Hamas's fault. Right.
Right. If Israel was not bombing Gaza right now, the entirety of the media apparatus, public opinion would be talking about freeing those hostages, doing something about those hostages. But instead, people are focused on what's going on to innocent Palestinian men, women, and children who have nothing to do with this. Because that's ongoing. Like the hostages have been taken. The only thing that can happen now is the governments do something to free them, but the hostages have been taken.
That's exactly it, and it's the backwards facing. The consistent effort to only look backward is a way for people to commit atrocities behind people's back. If people are looking backwards in the past, they're not able to see what's happening behind them, which is the nearly 7,000 civilian. This is going to be an undercount. But 7,000 dead Palestinian civilians, 3,000 of them children, over 60% of them are women and children. Don't look at that. Look away, and don't have sympathy. They're all terrorists. They should all be dehumanized. And just think about this for a second. Like, if the United States was funding a Muslim extremist organization, which is, you can call the Israeli government, a Muslim extremist formal government, let's say, in the vein of the Israeli government, and they were bombing a 141 square mile strip of land with 2.4 million people in it, and it was more bombs dropped in that small area than we did in the first year of our invasion of Afghanistan, and civilians were getting killed over and over and over again. You think that everybody wouldn't be outraged as well? Like, this is not about the tribal nature that these really like fascist sociopaths are trying to make it out to be. This is just about basic humanity. That's it.
I was going to say, that does kind of almost describe our relationship with Saudi Arabia. But, again, that just goes part of this larger tapestry of human rights violations that the American government funds at home and abroad, that, they want to decontextualize this particular incident of Israeli aggression on the Palestinian people, because that also fits within a larger timeline of them doing that as well, which is another reason why it's easier to put that within the context. To put this particular genocidal ambition into the context of that larger history of them oppressing the Palestinian people than it is to act like it's a reasonable response to a terrorist attack.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just amazing to me that people can't contextualize that is an entire difference between what the Hamas attack and the ongoing assault in Gaza from the perspective of an American commentator. What'd you say?
And the West Bank too.
And the West Bank. Yeah. Well, we should add that too, because that's happening there too, where Hamas is not the ruling power. But it doesn't matter. They're Palestinians.
Like, even so, like the idea, I've seen this thing like, oh, why aren't people protesting against Hamas? What control do U.S. Activists here have over Hamas? Nothing.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing people don't seem to get. It's not that people are just out in the streets just voicing their outrage. No, they're focused on what's going on in Gaza and what's the bombing of Gaza. Because guess what? The U.S. is the government is backing what Israel's doing, and political opinion here matters. So U.S. activists can actually do something to affect the lives
of
the people who are on the line in Gaza, the innocent Palestinian people. The U.S. activists here have zero power over freeing the hostages from Hamas. Zero.
Yeah.
Oh, they can shout all they
want.
Or the
Hamas attack before.
Right,
the Hamas attack before that happened, and it was not anticipated, right? And those deaths were horrific and tragic, and the hostage taking horrific and tragic. But it's about what we can control, and what we can control is limiting the massacre that's happening in Gaza, and there are seemingly no signs of the massacre slowing down. So that's why people are freaking out and outraged and sick to their stomachs. It's not difficult to comprehend.
Everything in this conflict always goes back to power. Who's able to do something right now? Who's able to control what happens to everybody, really? And every single time that lands on the world powers, Israel, the United States government, the entire West, there's nothing that people who have zero power, even us, can do to convince anything on the other side otherwise in terms of what's going on Hamas or other organizations. Because, well, first of all, they don't even hold the power in the scenario to end the bombings in Gaza, but we have no power to them. What we do have is power to show the U.S. government that the vast majority of people don't approve. You could see it in the Biden approval ratings that literally just came out about an hour before we went live. Biden, in a month, lost 11 points with Democrats, down 11 points with Democrats. The analyses I've seen are all saying it has to do with what's going on in Israel. It's very clear that people in the United States, especially people in Biden's party, the base, are not happy with what's going on. And that's why you're seeing protests out in the streets, because that's the one thing we can control. That's the one thing we have some sort of power to do. And that's to show our government that we do not approve of what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Go ahead.
Chantel Brown, still a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, who beat Nina Turner with a large amount of AIPAC money, was one of these people who co-sponsored the resolution, which is condemning the terrorism of Hamas, and which sends a message to the world: we stand with Israel. That's why they invested in her, instead of all the other folks who are saying, I do condemn attacks on civilians, including the ones that Israel is doing in lieu of going after and trying to secure the freedom of those hostages, because again, they don't want those hostages freed. They're serving their purpose for them just fine right now. And anybody who wants to continue to support Israel's bombing of Gaza because of what happened on the 7th, they are telling you that rather than those people being brought home safely, they want to send a message about terrorism. That's what they are saying to you.
It's also just, rank racism too. It's rank racism and Islamophobia, because ultimately the Israeli government is telling you that they don't believe in civilians. They don't believe that civilians exist in the context of Palestinians. Civilians only are allowed to exist in the context of Western powers. If you vote for a country or a government, or even if you don't vote for a country or government that is consistently involved in imperialist or genocidal violence, that doesn't implicate you in any way politically, morally, intellectually. But if you happen to share the same skin tone as people and live in the same general vicinity as people who commit violence against any group, you're able to be painted with that broad brush. And we see that across the globe. We see that, the idea of civilians is something that we deny, and we have denied to Arabs in the Middle East just by nature of the war on terror. We know Obama's drone policy was that if you're just hanging out in Iraq or Afghanistan and you could be a terrorist, then we will just call you that, and we won't acknowledge that you're a casualty or a civilian in any sense of the way, because it looks bad for us. And so, I mean, it's just something that as a country we have yet to reckon with, because we are in many ways held hostage by our two-party system, that there is still a, moral weight to supporting Joe Biden if you happen to have voted for him. I did not vote for Joe Biden. I know, just want to put that out there. But if you did, and even though I didn't, I still feel a sort of moral weight for being an American who exists within a paradigm that is the biggest exponent of violence in the world. And, I think that in the West, we do a very good job of propagandizing ourselves that that's something that we can all wash our hands of. And so I applaud the people who are out there protesting, because they feel a passion that a lot of people are very willing to just go like, that's unreasonable. Just because I voted for the guy doesn't mean I support everything he does. There's a lot of excuses about how you're not part of this problem. In fact, that you're completely divorced from the American or Israeli government in a way that we just don't allow other people in countries that we're oppressing to be.
Yeah, and I want to shout out, there's a piece in Teen Vogue. Everyone should share it, because I think it's like the only place that covered this, but by Lexi McMenamin. College students at more than 100 campuses across the country plan to walk out today and to protest for a ceasefire in Gaza, and for their universities to sever their close ties to arms manufacturers providing Israel with its weapons, like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Raytheon. National walkout was organized by a broad coalition of groups, including the Palestinian Youth Movement, the anti-war organization, dissenters. And I'll just say, list these groups. God bless all these kids who are standing up in a way that I think is extremely inspiring. I was a college kid during Occupy, so there was some activism, but I feel like it's even more mature now than it was when I was a college kid. And absolute shame on anybody calling these kids participating in this anti-Semitic. I don't know how, one, you're playing a dangerous game with the concept of anti-Semitism, but two, you are smearing some of the best our country has to offer.
A lot of time they're smearing young Jews too as anti-Semitic. I mean, honestly, some of the most prominent and loudest voices in this have been young Jewish people, and it amazes me that people attack them when that's the most brave stance they could possibly take, and it's the right stance. And I really respect those people, really do.
Yep, exactly. All right, folks, let's take a call really quickly. Calling from an 816 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
With me?
This is you, but it's a little bit difficult to hear you.
Oh, here, let me get off of my phone real quick. Sorry. Is this better?
Yes, this is better.
All right, sorry about that. Hi, I'm Colin from Columbia, Missouri. First off, I just wanted to say appreciate y'all. I just started listening a few months ago, and have been delving in on literally all your guys' content, and I love it. What I wanted to ask though is, I'm still a relatively young person, and really want to get more into my activism. I haven't really been super active outside of just social media stuff, and I was wondering if you guys have any good resources for just activism in general, because I really want to do
in general related to Israel,
or
Palestine?
just anything.
No, just this summer, the labor movement has been super inspiring to see, and just seeing all this has been a really huge time for people finally that last straw for a lot of people to finally start speaking their piece and really trying to make a change whenever it just seems so helpless a lot of the times.
Yeah, I mean, where are you calling from, caller?
He said Missouri.
Columbia.
Columbia, Missouri. I mean, there's got to be a DSA in Columbia. It's a college town, right? I'd say like those groups, I think are really where it's at, because I think DSA has done a lot of good with regards to the labor stuff this summer, and I think that stuff is really developing. I think DSA is at least the place to start for me.
Yeah, there's going to be there's going to be like obviously organizations for specific causes. So like you would have to also like sort of narrow down exactly what you're interested in. Like if you want to get involved with all, that's great. But like, starting out, you want to probably narrow down, like, am I interested in looking at these labor actions, or do I want to get involved in this like healthcare action? Because there's specific organizations that deal with specific issues. Yeah, and so that's also something you could do as well.
In Kansas City, I know they have the KC Tenants Union too, which is doing great stuff with regards to eviction moratorium and stuff like that. So I'd say, that's another one in addition to a DSA. But KC Tenants punches above their weights for Kansas City-based activist organization, as far as I can tell.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much. I appreciate that. And left is best, as
Left
always.
is best.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for
Thank
the
you
call.
very much.
And the kind words.
Yeah, of course. Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Kids are all right.
Let's take another call here. I'm like, soothing me hearing from wonderful people. Let's see, calling from a 207 area code. I hope I didn't jinx it and you're not a libertarian or something. 207?
Hello?
Hello, 207. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello.
Yep, you're on the air.
Thank you. This is Mary from Maine.
Mary from Maine.
And
What's
I'm
on
not a
your mind?
libertarian.
Great. Love to hear it.
Well, a lot's on my mind right now, as you can probably imagine. But I just wanted to call and thank you guys for what you do, because the coverage, I think, is really important. And I also want to direct people who might be listening that are from Maine to a couple different places, if that's okay.
Sure. Go ahead.
So the first is, if you are also really upset about this and you think that Maine should be passing more rigorous gun protections here in the state, then I encourage Mainers to go to the Maine Gun Safety Coalition page. And there you can find the legislators in your area, and you can call them and let them know that this is just not cool. It's not acceptable, and we need to do something about it. Just for context, 72% of Mainers approve of a background check for purchasing guns, and 72% of Mainers also approve of a 72-hour waiting period for purchasing a gun. And both of them just recently lost in the Senate. And you can imagine why. Our Senate's mostly Republican. So I don't really have a question per se. I just want people to be able to go there, find the lawmakers in their area, and let them know that we need to do something about this, because so many people I know say, I'm so surprised that I could never believe that this was going to happen here. And I think that's a little one-sided, because it can happen anywhere, and that is proven yesterday. So anyway, thank you guys for what you do.
I'm looking at the Giffords Law Center gun law scorecard. And the Northeast basically is filled with, A's, A-, B, even Connecticut has a C, C-. Maine's got an F for gun laws.
Yep.
So it's bad there in terms of what could be done,
And Emma touched on this at the first half, but you're hard pressed to find somebody in Maine who isn't a hunter or is directly connected to somebody who is a hunter. So I think that really plays a big role in it. But that in a lot of ways is a really selfish way to look at the situation that we're in. So I think this is having it so close to home for a lot of people is going to be a big eye opener. At least I hope it is. And, doing the coverage like you guys do is incredibly helpful. So anyway, thank you guys, and left is best. Bye.
Left is best. Thanks so much for the call. What should we do here? Go ahead.
Do like non-conservative hunters like think that these gun laws are going to affect them? Like, unless you're a conspiracy theorist or believe that the government's out to take your guns. I don't see there's plenty of hunting in states that have lots of gun laws, and those hunters are able to access their firearms. If you're not gonna do something horrible with your guns, you're not going to be affected. You're going to be able to hunt and game and all you want.
Right.
Yeah, I wish there was a little. I've always thought that split was something that could be exploited. The split between the sort of like standard hunting, with a double-barreled shotgun over your shoulder and a bird dog next to you, which is the type of people I come from, versus like the weekend warrior sort of, I'm going to be John Rambo and have the arsenal from Tremors in my basement. Unfortunately, though, the hysteria really feeds into people, and it's pretty rare. Like if you're pro gun control as a hunting person, even as like a liberal one, you don't talk about it that much.
Yep.
Even though I do think there is a difference in sort of like the classes of different gun owners, because I think the weekend warrior type is what the gun manufacturers turn to make greater profits, because people who hunt pheasants don't need all the bump stocks and the extra shit, and buy as much ammunition to go blow through it at extremely high rates. So I wish that was the case, but like I don't know if it's gonna happen.
If I was like a gun person, I would be like embarrassed that those like Rambo types, AK-47 wearing, just to walk down the street to like look tough like types. Like I would be embarrassed to be associated with those people. Like I'm embarrassed when I retweet something on Twitter and someone replies to that person that I retweeted with a bad take, and I check and I can see that the person follows me and that's where they came from.
With you.
Like I get embarrassed of that. Like if I was a gun person, I'd be super embarrassed to be associated with these people who like flaunt their guns the way that some of these like right wingers do. I'd want gun laws so I could so it would be clear that responsible gun owners like myself are not associated with those types.
Well, people do want gun laws. That's another thing that you can kind of like weave into the anti-democratic nature of our society. That's proof of its anti-democratic nature. In the sense that like we know, generally speaking, that people support more intensive background checks. They support, various forms of, expanded background checks for gun owners. That's just something that we're not allowed to have because moneyed interest opposes it. It's not as though we live in a country where 50% of people think that you should be allowed to bring a gun into your child's school to pick them up. And the other 50% don't think that. This is just another version of the American populace being held hostage by, the gun lobby, the military industrial complex, and the money they pump into our politicians. If anything, I think more people should emphasize just how unpopular guns are in our society. Like, It's not as though every person owns a gun in America. That's just propaganda. Most guns are owned by a minority of even gun owners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that 100% with that. And like, so my point is like, you can't really split off the good gun owners from the bad ones. How I address the people in my family who are the sort of pheasant hunting gun owners is that you either participate in as a civil society in addressing this gun violence issue, or you get rolled over. And unfortunately, despite like people are embarrassed by like the Rambo types, but not enough to say like I disagree with them about the NRA.
Right.
And to me, fine. If you take that maximalist obstructionist position, while I personally have some belief in limited right to bear arms or whatever, like I can be persuaded on that. But if you just say no, we're not doing nothing, we're not meeting you even a quarter of the way as people get slaughtered, then I'm sorry, you deserve your rights to get rolled over.
All right, let's do this InfoWars thing. I need to have some fun here. So, you guys know Owen Schroyer of InfoWars fame? Well, probably you don't, because you're a sane person if you're watching this video. probably don't tune into InfoWars on a regular basis, but, you know, Owen is not just an InfoWars personality. He is also an insurrectionist, and he pled guilty and is headed to jail or / prison for 60 days. Jail, I believe he's going to. And he did this big announcement saying, please help support me while I'm in prison. I've been banned from Twitter, but here's this account that will help tell my story while I'm away. And he wants his followers to have his back here, you know, as a patriot and a martyr. But you know who doesn't seem to have his back? His boss, Alex.
This is tough. This is tough. I've been dealing with a lot, as you can imagine, these last couple of weeks with my legal stuff, facing jail time and even more things behind the scenes. So I've been struggling on how to approach this. So I'm just going to tell it like it is because that's all I do. And I've come up with a solution, but it goes like this. As I've said before and was expressed to me before, essentially InfoWars can no longer cover any security expenses or any expenses if I want to travel, or when I have traveled, they don't cover it, or they can't send a crew. So there's not going to be a crew sent to my turn-in. There's not going to be any security. I've had to pay for what I'll have when I turn myself in, and there will be some security and some crew there to make sure I can shoot videos and get videos up. But InfoWars was not able to take care of those expenses, and that has been the case for some time now. And so I've had to pay for that myself, and I've had to do some fundraising myself. And I will just say that if it wasn't for your support in my legal fundraiser, I don't know where I would be. But thanks to your support with my legal fundraiser, I now have I've got 3 legal cases going on and great representation. Not only my defense and what is now going to be an appeal process that will go to the Supreme Court, dealing with my political incarceration and political persecution. Also, my persecution in defense of these bogus IRS demands, as well as going on the offense against Twitter or X for their censorship of me, still trying to get my original account back, as well as the digital defamation and digital identity theft that I'm dealing with. If it wasn't for your support there for those legal funds, I really don't know where I'd be. And unfortunately, it only got worse.
So he keeps going on, right? Is that there's more? Oh. If I had the soundboard, I'd be playing the Rose.
He sounds like a professional victim to me.
Yeah. Last week, Jones claimed to viewers that he was personally, quote, upside down $1 million in response to a Sandy Hook-related unfavorable bankruptcy court ruling. All right, let's just hear a little bit more what this guy has to say.
And unfortunately, it only got worse and more complicated when I found out that InfoWars and free speech systems would not be paying me anymore while I'm away.
Oh.
So you can imagine, you can imagine how that felt. Now, here's the good news. I am going to continue on, and I have launched a new site because I don't just want you to donate to me. I'm not a communist. So I've launched a store, owenschroyer.store. And we've got some T-shirts up, and these T-shirts will, at least if we sell a couple thousand of them, we'll make sure that I'm paid for.
Just a couple thousand.
I'm incarcerated.
Goes right to the commissary.
Because let me tell you, the fact that I'm not going to be paid while I'm away is a bit of a difficult situation.
So here's this T-shirt with
60
my face on it.
days!
That's how it is around
60
here.
days! He's
It's kind of
basically
fresh.
outside of my salary, that the company is completely capped now, and so there's nothing they can do about it. But that certainly made it.
I believe it too. Alex Jones, he can't even, it was just ruled that he couldn't declare bankruptcy in order to get paying the Sandy Hook victims. So yeah.
He's like an employee of Steven Crowder now.
Owen, it's like you're saying, right, it's like you're seeing this massive meteor come at you in slow motion, and you're not, like, you're still expecting to not get scalded. Like, your boss is in for $1 billion because of the lies that he spread about the Sandy Hook victims. You think he's got the money to pay you while you're in the can?
He's like, it's a little, I would say, fucked up that I'm gonna go away for 60 days with no severance.
I mean, Alex?
I
actually don't believe him. Because he's saying this on InfoWars. Like, Alex Jones wouldn't let him go rogue. Like, this is all just part of their grift. It's their scheme. To go on TV, tell them that I can't afford to pay you.
That's a good point.
You're screwed over. Like, this isn't like he's filming this on his own and, like, a video.
He's on the InfoWars set.
He's on the InfoWars show. On their website, ban.video is their platform. That's Alex Jones's platform. It's his replacement because they can't stream on YouTube anymore. This is part of their grift. Go on TV, also, say, because of Sandy Hook, I'm sure it's based in truth, obviously. Alex Jones is really screwed because of the Sandy Hook, well, because of him and his words that resulted in the Sandy Hook trial. But, I mean, this is clearly part of their grift. Go on there, say, I can't afford to pay you anymore. You're all by yourself. You're all alone because you stood up for Donald Trump. It's all part of their grift.
Yeah. Right.
Also, I've never heard of a job that continues to pay you while you're in prison, though. I'm sure there are some that exist. Like that does seem like a big ask. I mean,
like a mafia.
He probably was. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. He'll give a little taste when he comes out. All he's gonna have is
don't flip on me.
Brain fuel or whatever, brain juice. What did they call? What does he call his
alpha fuel,
force?
Alpha. What is it?
Alpha brain.
It's something
alpha brain.
Yeah, give him alpha brain. Send it to like someone to smuggle some alpha brain into your jail.
Right. Yeah.
And
sorry,
we'll be able to grow big muscles and break right out of prison.
Alpha your way out of jail, buddy.
You're gonna be the only source of alpha brain in that penitentiary.
We're gonna see like a grainy YouTube thumbnail.
Oh, Brain Force. Sorry.
Brain Force.
We're gonna see a grainy
so
YouTube
different.
thumbnail of Owen Schroyer being like, "Prison break live stream?" ?
I would love for them to let him live stream from prison. I think that would be fine. Not legally, but in terms of content, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do think people in prison should be able to use the internet. So you know what?
Well, yeah.
If Schroyer is the person who has to break that glass ceiling, I mean, they're trying to take books out of people's prison cells. So I mean, it would be a way forward, and also we get content out of it.
I mean, the thing is, like, he was there at January 6th with Alex Jones. Like, Alex Jones was there too. He could have just stuck with Alex and not taken that extra step, and he probably would be not going to prison. Like, Alex didn't get in trouble for January 6th.
Right.
Because Alex Jones was smart enough. I wonder if Alex Jones was like, Owen, could you go in there and cover it for InfoWars? I'll stay out here. You go in there and cover it for InfoWars.
Deep state asset Alex Jones did end up going to jail. I wonder what that means.
It honestly, right, exactly. Look into it, folks. I mean, why is he seemingly untouched by the federal authorities? I saw him give his speech. Same with Roger Stone.
Alaska. They got Owen Schroyer.
Yep.
But they're not going to get Alex.
It's very weird that they were both there together, and Alex Jones was very careful not to go inside. But his partner at InfoWars, here he is getting in trouble for it. I mean, clearly something's off. I do wonder what Alex Jones gave Owen as his role that day.
Right, exactly.
You're my inside the Capitol reporter. You got to go in there.
All right, let's take a call here. Calling from a 612 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Jeff from Minneapolis.
Jeff from Minneapolis, what's on your mind?
Just in the context of the Israel-Palestine conflict, within the last few days, you mentioned on your show that it's difficult for people to understand the magnitude of what the people in Gaza are going through.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in high school in 2008, we actually had a Palestinian advocate come to the school and talk to us. And he contextualized a lot of it through the Northern Irish conflict. And I would just like say to people, like, it's actually a very good contextual conflict to understand the magnitude of what's going on there, because it's very similar in power dynamics with the asymmetry, the tit for tat retaliation between the people who are being oppressed and the people who are occupying and oppressing. One of the really good voices that I've heard and studied is Bernadette Devlin McCleskey. I don't know if you guys have heard her name before, but she was a peace advocate, a British MP in the 70s. She does a really good talk with William F. Buckley in like 1972, where she discusses these kind of dynamics from a leftist perspective, because she was a socialist, and that's how she got herself elected. So I just wanted to call in and throw that information out there for people who want more context for these types of conflicts, and to say that when you look at it, notice the death toll in Palestine, Israel. The amount of children that have died in the last 2 weeks is almost or similar to the entire 3 decades of the Troubles. And you can't talk to somebody from Northern Ireland and them not have like a visceral reaction to the terror they experienced during that time. And their death toll isn't even close to, you know, what's going on there. And they're, you know, to be glib, there were a lot of bombs that went off in Northern Ireland too. They just, you know, it wasn't until the late 80s when they were targeting civilians that things really got out of hand. And the thing that surprises me personally is how the targeting of civilians on both sides isn't bringing the Israeli and Palestinian people like more towards like, we have to end this, because to be sort of reductive, that's kind of what happened in Northern Ireland. Once kids started dying, once there was that kind of collateral damage, once the RUC was targeting families of the IRA, like when that stuff started happening, it really became like this thing where the rest of the people in Northern Ireland are like, this has got to like end on some level. And it didn't really end until they lifted, you know, checkpoints, and there was freedom of movement, and there's still bigotry there, but, you know, people aren't dying all the time. So I think it's really good contextual history for people out there who are looking for more information on these types of conflicts.
Yeah, no, thanks for the call. The actual, like the easy thing that you can take away from that is the whole thing we're hearing from Israelis now, which is don't negotiate with terrorists. And that is not how you bring conflicts to end. And putting aside which moral side you are on, which I am on the side of the Ireland and decolonization. But from the perspective of the British, you say don't negotiate with terrorists, and from the perspective of the Irish, say don't negotiate with colonists. Like, this is actually negotiating is better, and we can use these labels to continue setting the stage for violence, or you cannot.
Yeah, and I really want to just reiterate that if you listen to that peace activist that I mentioned earlier, she's very much like in that realm of talking about things. She has some really great things to say about how, or did say, because this is a historical person, just about how, like, she never really called herself a nationalist or a unionist, and she got elected by Protestants and Catholics. She had a very blunt way of saying that it wasn't actually about being Protestant or Catholic. It was about working class people and how they were treated like through the economics in Northern Ireland. It's very good content.
Thanks for the
and
recommendation.
It's very informative.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, caller.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Fruity Dinosaur, I'm late in catching up with yesterday's episode, but Emma said she took Latin in high school and the class was more like a history class. Did you also have the Latin language book where the family was stuck in a ditch for like 15 chapters? I don't remember that. I don't remember that part. But yeah, the language books were, they often like involved anecdotes about what it was like to live in that time period. And then once we were done with the language part, it was mostly just about the history, what people would eat, who Cicero was. My teacher loved Cicero, loved talking about him.
You gotta be conjugating verbs, not
I
learning all
know,
that bullshit.
I know, but she was.
Right.
I kind of loved her. It was like
Latin-
way more what I wanted to be doing than being in an actual language class.
Latin was always the one that like the smart kids took. Like in my school, at least, it's like you're gonna take a language. Oh, Spanish, hands down, of course. That's the easiest one out of all those.
Yeah, no, I was not one of the smart kids in that way, because I did go to the all girls school, and they were very high achievers there, and I was really good at history and English and bad at everything else and just slacked off. So I was considered, like kind of a why aren't you doing more of your work kind of kid in high school. But I turned out all right. And math and science suck. So what do you know?
Based off, I just wanted to, based off that call, the previous call, did you guys happen to see that video from this football soccer game over in Scotland, Celtic FC?
Oh yeah.
Did you see that? Here, I'll put a link to a video in the chat if you want to pull it up. It's quite an amazing thing to see. To sort of give more context to like the solidarity that people in Ireland and Scotland show with Palestinian people.
Yeah,
that you don't see anywhere else, really. I don't think there's any that level of that anywhere else really in the West, where it seems to be mainstream there in ways that it's not mainstream anywhere else.
And for obvious reasons, and that
Right.
aren't to do with people's genetics or whatever, but the history that they have lived under and inherited. And yeah, do you have that, Bradley? I put in sound polls this clip of what is it? Celtic FC.
Celtic FC, yeah.
Do they say Celtic or Celtic?
I don't know what they say. I say Celtic.
Right. Okay.
I saw
not
this.
Scottish.
It's Celtic. It's got to be Celtic.
Celtic.
Yes,
yeah, it's gotta
Celtic.
be.
Not the Celtics. The Celtic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Celtic Football Club.
There we go.
That's from Jerry and the Pacemakers. You'll Never Walk Alone. In case people want to listen to the original song.
Actually, the original is a show tune from Carousel.
Oh,
and
for
then
real?
it got covered by a bunch of different bands over the years. Yeah. And it's become super popular at football games over the years too. But yeah.
It's chilling to hear that.
I can't talk. Yeah. Calling from a 360 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Justin. I'm calling from Bremerton. I wanted to. I talked about a right-wing radio show in my local area, and a liberal was talking about how he wanted to say that the left was going to moralize guns as a way to take away and I wanted to kind of push back against that. How can I push back against that? Is what I'm trying to ask.
I know we get a lot of these kinds of questions. How people can deal with this kind of conversation in people's personal life. These kinds of conversations in people's personal lives. Yeah, I mean,
you are part of a society, is how you start.
Yeah. I think it's about what is your role as a citizen, and everybody has a role to play, right? And everybody has a role to play in the collective health of the society. And is your commitment to owning these weapons more important than the general welfare of the country? And you can just say, hey, I'm still okay with people buying guns. We just have to have a licensing process that makes a bit more sense and try to ease them into it there.
Okay. That's pretty much what I was trying to explain to them too, is that I'm not against guns, that we need good regulation, that the mental health aspect of it too, that they brought up was there's a lot of violence in the right-wing states versus the blue states. And I asked them to look at, well, what about the material conditions in the red states, and the Medicaid expansion in red states didn't happen versus blue states.
Right.
And I tried to bring that up to them to talk about that, and they almost got there, but I feel that it's very hard to articulate what I want to say about that.
I mean, you just kind of have to let people say, like, what is your solution then to the continued slaughter that is exceptional here in this country? And, like maybe they have some things, and get them talking rather than, I find just let people exhaust themselves with what they think, and they quickly run to the end rather than making them respond to what you think is often like a better thing. But fundamentally, like I say, we live in a society. You see these things and you don't like them as much as I do. What is your solution? And it has to be something. It can't just be, that's tough, I need my guns. Because to the extent that happens, like it becomes not about persuading those people, and it's going to be about them getting rolled over by a society that no longer wants to tolerate mass slaughter, and they aren't going to be able to influence it at all, because they're going to be too staunch in opposition to it. So, like I'd say, you can either join us in trying to build a solution to this problem, or you can just wait until your worst fears are imagined.
Thank you. That's very well put. I will re-listen to this and try to articulate it that way to them. Thank you so much.
Yes, well said, Matt. Thanks. Dan from Columbus, I think the Celtic fans were also the ones that started Lizzie's in a box chants, which I found very catchy.
You should have saw Emma cry over that one.
The league had warned Celtic FC that if their fans brought those flags, they'd be fined or something like that. Like this was like they knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And they tried to stop it.
It's unbelievable. The amount of like the way that anti-racism is being deployed to suppress support of Palestine is outrageous right now. And you see this in Germany too. You see Antifa attacked a home for migrants because they're showing support for Palestine. Like, bro, you guys have completely misunderstood. This is why I've never felt comfortable with the 3 arrows thing, just to say that. But that you guys have completely lost the absolute plot.
Ramona in the 603, I watch a show at work and I just need you to know that I'm sobbing on my I can't talk about that because then it's I'm gonna get made fun of for crying again.
All this acting you're doing,
I know.
These auditions.
Honestly,
that amped up psychopaths. That the only way they can address this conflict is through policing other people that they can use to market themselves.
Well,
Ravana got attacked for the same thing. YouTuber with TYT, who's she does Twitch stuff. she got emotional. It's rightfully so. I mean, I get emotional.
So did Hassan. So did
yeah.
Hassan, and you know,
Right.
of course.
The other people are psychopaths. I mean, they can kiss my ass.
Yeah, well, I'm also auditioning for a Hollywood production. That's why I joined the show.
You're crying on Q stuff is
because
really
of Sam's, Hollywood connections, baby.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not
Walker
only
too.
people covering this. I don't know if you guys have seen these conspiracy theories about Pallywood. People believe that everything you see over in Gaza is manufactured production, that they are all actors, that the people are wearing makeup. And I mean, if you look online, you'll find video of right-wing Israeli people literally mocking them by dressing up and pretending to be, dressing in, tropey clothing and putting like makeup on them so it looks like they're in rubble and acting like that's what they're doing. Like it's really sick. Like
no, them doing that is as close as they'll get to acknowledging that it's happening, because they'll acknowledge that it's bad, but it's not happening.
Yep. Let's do this UAW thing because we should definitely comment on this, I think. So big news. The UAW has announced that it's reached a tentative agreement with one of the big three, and that is Ford. And the agreement reportedly includes a 25% wage increase through April 2028. It also includes the reinstatement of the cost of living adjustments, which were a huge sticking point here. What happened was that during the Great Recession, the workers were asked to take a pay cut or a haircut, I should say, on their benefits and on something in particular called a cost of living adjustment, which allowed for their raises over time. And during that period, the bosses of these big automakers said, "Don't you worry, we will return and give you back the cost of living adjustments. Just let us get through this period of tumult and difficulty as the economy was in shambles and the auto industry in particular was in such trouble." This has finally, because of the UAW's strength on this, they finally have cost of living allowance / adjustment back in their contract, and these wage increases. But let's let Sean Fain, who I didn't realize Matt can do a killer impression of and was doing before the show. Maybe we'll save that later. Speaking about what the Ford agreement actually entails.
UAW family, I'm excited and honored to be joined today by Vice President Chuck Browning as we announce a major victory in the stand-up strike. Today, we reached a tentative agreement with Ford. For months, we've said that record profits mean record contracts. And UAW family, our stand-up strike has delivered. What started at 3 plants at midnight on September 15th has become a national movement. We knew we were getting close, but we also knew the companies needed a major push if we were going to make sure we got every penny possible in this agreement. So we took our strike to a new phase and hit the companies with maximum effect. On Monday, we called on our UAW family at Sterling Heights Assembly to stand up. That is Stellantis' biggest and most profitable plant. On Tuesday, our UAW family at Arlington Assembly answered the call, and they went out on strike, shutting down GM's biggest and most profitable plant. Ford knew what was coming for them on Wednesday if we didn't get a deal. That was checkmate. On day 40 of the stand-up strike, we reached a historic agreement. As you know, in our union, the members are the highest authority. That means we have a process for rolling out the details of the agreement and making sure every member gets a chance to make an informed decision. So here are the next steps.
Yeah, well, that's it. So he outlines the ratification from there, but that's kind of the meat of the announcement. This is very good news. I do think that hopefully this puts pressure on Stellantis and GM to get this over with. And
This is a headline over at Business Insider, by the way. The UAW's blockbuster deal will see Ford workers' pay jump more in 4 years than all pay rises in the past 2 decades combined, the union says.
That's amazing. And I mean, I still always outsource this to the rank and file and what they have to say about their opinion of the gains that have been made. But I just want to kind of throw some shade on the people who felt that they could criticize the tactics of the stand-up strike, the rolling strikes at different plants that were strategically planned from the outside. Like, that's a conversation for the rank and file from the union, in the union.
And if the media participates in a conversation like that, it should be after a failure. To do it in the run-up and actually the attempt when you're trying to get everyone to achieve solidarity, I think is despicable. And of course, there's a lot of dum-dums who did it. Shama Sawant also, who I've had on Left Reckoning, and I appreciated that she won power as a socialist. To leave that position and then just do this media thing where you're I just think it was really
it's arrogant.
Inappropriate. It's inappropriate.
It's inappropriate, and when it's arrogant to assume that you know better than the people who are actually the workers in this instance and who are the ones who are a part of the union. This is different than critiquing a piece of legislation. This is about a collective effort, and Shawn Fain is popular among the rank and file. So waiting to see what they have to say about this, but
so many of those people were just upset that Fain and the UAW was closer, despite not endorsing him, closer to Biden than the Republicans. And a lot of this is actually just crypto Republican get out the vote or suppress the vote operatives trying to obscure an issue.
We have a few more details that Shawn Fain provides here. Let's take a listen for a little bit more.
That democratic process take its course. But we also wanted to provide you with some key takeaways of this historic agreement.
Our union has united in a way we haven't seen in years. From the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, our members came together to tell the big three with one voice that record profits mean a record contract. Thanks to the power of our members on the picket line and the threat of more strikes to come, we have won the most lucrative agreement per member since Walter Reuther was president. Between wage increases, COLA, annual bonuses to retirees, and other economic gains, there is more value for our members in each individual year of this agreement than the entirety of the 2019 agreement. This deal puts more money on the table than the 2019 agreement 4 times over. So when we say historic, we mean it. We have won a 25% general wage increase over the course of this agreement. With COLA, we expect the top wage rate to increase by over 30% to above $40 an hour. Our starting wage rate will rise 68%. For decades, temps at the Big Three have been abused and exploited. Over the life of the contract, temps will see raises of over 150%. Some of our lower tier members at Sterling Axle and Rawsonville will see an immediate 85% raise upon ratification. UAW members at Ford will receive more in straight general wage increases over the next 4.5 years than we have over the last 22 years combined.
Wow.
At ratification, Ford workers will receive an immediate 11% wage increase. That's almost equal to all of the wage increases since 2007 combined.
So those were just some more of the details to fill in how important and historic this is. If all of that gets ratified, again, the agreement is just tentative. But
yeah, I haven't, for instance, heard anything on the EVs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we'll see what the details are there.
We will. But I mean, I remember Ford's CEO is the brother of Chris Farley. Did you guys know this?
Yes, exactly.
And he came on it was some financial news network and was saying months ago that this would bankrupt the company. So I think we should all be on the lookout to see if Ford goes bankrupt now that it's paying its workers a living wage.
This was also the guy who like filled his diaper over Sean Fain not joining a meeting with like Henry Ford's great-great-grandson. He was like, he was Mr. Ford's great-grandson.
Oh, the blood
and
of
he
that
come to the meeting.
Nazi sympathizer. Wonderful.
Yeah, it's like, dog, your brother died like 27 years ago, and he contributed more in his short life than you ever did in as the head of this company. So
yeah.
Get bent.
Anyway, I think that'll be it for our clips. Screw it. I'm sorry, guys. We did take a good amount of calls today, but that's it for calls. We'll read some IMs and get out of here. Left of the Box says, the movie Wag the Dog had interesting commentary on war and politics. Sad that people missed the point and think it was a blueprint for faking wars. What's Up Dog says Emma is auditioning for the I'm with Busey revival. Yes, I'll have many dramatic scenes in that.
You're Gary Busey's PA.
The crying will come in handy for that.
Gary, we need you at this appointment. You just break down and crying. There you go.
Yeah. A Square, MR Thursdays, that video of Irish people singing You Never Walk Alone brought me the tears. Thanks. Yes.
Yeah.
PGH Pete says, I really hope Eve Fartlow lives near that football stadium.
I mean, that's another thing to note. Like people are so propaganda is that they are conditioned to view that as like an entire, not a people standing with a suppressed people who are actively undergoing just massive casualties right now, but support of terrorism.
Yeah.
Like that's how hysterical that basically Western support of a exclusionary Jewish state as opposed to a state that secures the rights for everybody. Like that's the perversion in people's minds about what they're looking at. It all stems from our inability to confront exactly how the nature of Israel as John Kerry puts it, can either be a Jewish state or can be a democratic one, and it's not going to be a democratic one.
Omega says, I hope Owen doesn't come down with ligma in prison or get hired anywhere else if he goes there. This week was the most exhausting because of what happened to that journalist from Al Jazeera. As a dad, you never want the news that you were away for work and your family isn't going to be waiting for you at home to hug you. I wish I could bring everybody. Yes, I haven't been. That video is
horrible.
I can almost stomach seeing the dead bodies, but seeing the people who are alive reacting and not having anyone, the orphan boy seeing his mother's dead body.
And being surrounded by press because they're a journalist, and the family was attacked because they were a member of the press. I mean, and then you got to have that moment where you're seeing the body of your loved ones and cameras are around you, and then you have to react for them. What we're putting people through is absolutely unbearable.
Owen from Boston, hey Emma and TMR crew, when I get banned from Twitter for doxing transphobes, I simply moved on with my life. Why do all these egomaniacs feel so entitled to their banned Twitter accounts that they would sue Twitter? Thanks, left is best. John Miller, Canada has a robust hunting system, yet more gun control laws than the US, yet American hunters fly up every hunting season, so it's clearly not so cumbersome. Seems like something America would want to look at.
I think the sort of capitalist values are going to destroy that sort of like our sort of nostalgic view of hunting. This is all giant trips where you're paying thousands of dollars to outfitters. You need a lot of equipment, and you need even to get permission to hunt on a certain land. You need permission from the landowner. It's turning into. It used to be more of a democratic pastime, and I think it's turning into what you see in Europe, which is that it's a pastime for aristocrats.
Daredevil, DSA will also help start smaller partner chapters to larger chapters between small towns and big cities. Fredericksburg does this with Richmond, Virginia. That was a good advice to the caller. Slim Jimi Hendrix, it's normally pretty lonely being an anti-Zionist Jew. The last few weeks have made me more hopeful that the tide is turning on the issue. For everyone who says that we are all self-hating Jews, I once had a Chabad rabbi that I was studying with say that the Holocaust happened because Jews were becoming more modern and turning their backs on the Torah. These kinds of folks are a tiny but powerful a minority on the issue. We do need to drown out their opinion by getting more people involved in the discourse on Israel.
And as a non-Jew in media, I feel now confident and also like the responsibility to stand up when, especially like people like Meghan McCain are coming out and trotting out the word anti-Semitism all over the place to describe like Jewish Voice for Peace or something like that. It's disgusting.
3 more. Maddie Moron, have y'all considered having Dr. Finkelstein on? His perspective and scholarship are such vital corrective to the bloodthirsty frenzy in the imperialist media. His interview on True Anon moved me to tears at work by the end. I would be down. Hack All the Things says the repercussions of Alex Jones spreading Sandy Hook conspiracy has permanently effed the brains of thousands of people if they believe Gaza is a false flag crisis actors. Makes me all the more happier that it was ruled that he can never bankrupt away his court ruling payouts.
I mean, this sort of stuff, I don't know if we've necessarily even degenerated the crisis actor thing, because that's actually like, people need to deploy crisis actor because we're actually seeing horrible things. In previous, eruptions of this, it would just be like, oh, those people are using, all those civilians were just human shields.
Right.
And you don't even need to talk about anything deeper than that.
And the final I am of the day, Emma gives water to the dead says, I don't get that. Seeing very low chances of taking away guns or 30-round magazines, especially with 3D printers. I also don't want to take away or deny the means of self-defense to POC and LGBT. So what can be done to regulate firearms, including those in private hands that can reduce gun deaths, or is there another thing to focus on besides the white whale of gun bans? I mean, I think we've been very clear with our answers so far, so I don't.
Yeah,
really
I don't.
feel like...
I mean, this is why we talk about the production and the lawsuits and stuff like that, and not give the cops more money, because we know how that's going to play out. But ultimately, I think what you're saying isn't implicated from what I don't think that AR-15s are going to be the difference between somebody who's a part of a targeted population having a shotgun or a handgun versus an AR-15. I don't think needing the AR-15 is going to make the difference there, and even community self-defense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think it's really implicated.
All right, guys, gonna wrap up here. Thanks so much, Brandon, Binder, Matt, Bradley. Appreciate you all. We will see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot lights shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I get somewhere I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah,